Though this Aston Martin DB12 isn't the brand's core model in terms of sales, it's absolutely fundamental in defining what one of this famous marque's modern-day sports cars should be. A huge step forward over the DB11, this coupe version is that combination of track car and GT that many have long sought.
So this is the start of Aston Martin's next era. The DB12 is considered by the company to be the first car it has developed with the benefit of the fresh investment now available to the brand. And it's billed as the world's first super tourer. We'll be trying to unpack what that means here. The DB12 is pivotal in Aston Martin's plan to reposition itself in the market. Ask the brand what that means, and there's vague talk about a combination of Rolls-Royce luxury and Ferrari-style performance, which is basically what this model's DB11 predecessor promised at its launch back in 2016. That car launched with 12 cylinders, but most sales were of the V8 version, announced a year later. And despite the DB12 name, it's V8 power that continues here. Under the bonnet of an Aston Martin, for which no excuses need be made, only 20% of this car is carried over from the DB11. So, a fresh start, as we said. To find out more, you're going to need the usual comprehensive car and driving road test. So, what do we have here? Well, much more of an Aston Martin than its DB11 predecessor, certainly. First impressions are encouraging. No Aston Martin we've ever driven has steered as sharply as this, talkatively relating the roadway to your fingertips without disturbing them with it. This DB12 still more a GT than a McLaren or Lamborghini-like track-tamed sports car, but as we'll see, this part of the company's model line does at last now have a sports car style CV. A thoroughbred sports car deserves a thoroughbred engine, and this car gets exactly that. Yes, despite the DB12 badge, there's still a Mercedes-sourced 4-litre V8 up front, but it's apparently now much more bespoke to Aston and gets 680 PS, considerably more power than any DB11 ever had. As before, it's mated to a rear-mounted 8-speed ZF automatic transmission, but this time there's a 13% shorter final drive ratio that helps the uber rapid acceleration. This comes accompanied by an exhilarating roar as the twin turbos start blowing away at 2,750 RPM, and rest to 62 miles an hour is dispatched in just 3.6 seconds en route to 202 miles an hour. At a cruise, the growl switches to a note that's more muted and melodic. You'll probably spend most of your time in the GT drive mode, but the V8 gains more voice when you switch to Sport and is fully released when you engage Sport Plus. There's also an individual mode option to set your own parameters and a 911 style wet setting for when the road's sodden and you're concerned about deploying all that power through the rear wheels. This is the first Aston Martin DB to get an electronic rear differential like that of the smaller Vantage, and also the first to be offered with ceramic brakes, which we have fitted here. Plus, the bonded aluminium platform is 7% more torsionally rigid than it was in the DB11. There are stiffer anti-roll bars, the spring rates are about 5% stiffer, and for the 21-inch wheels, up from 20 inches before, there's a bespoke developed set of Michelin Pilot Sport 5S tyres. As a result, the engineers claim a 12% reduction in understeer, helped by phenomenal levels of grip, and you can feel it too. We referenced the steering feedback earlier. That comes courtesy of a proper electromechanical rack, not for Aston full electric steering assistance. You need that confidence too, because this is a big, wide car for narrower British secondary roads. There's much more too. You get a state-of-the-art ESP setup with a 6-axis inertia measurement system that predicts and manages slippage more effectively without being too intrusive. In addition, this car features a new generation version of the Skyhook adaptive damping system with dampers that apparently feature a 500% increase in bandwidth of force distribution. We're not entirely sure what that means, but it certainly sounds impressive. Under the bonnet, the cam profiles and compression ratios of the AMG engineered power plant have been enhanced to better support the V8's 2 larger diameter turbos. The result of all this takes Aston Martin closer to Ferrari than Bentley in terms of this DB12's road-going repertoire, which was precisely the objective. In time, there'll be an alternative to this car's conventional AMG-sourced engine. As we filmed, Aston was readying a plug-in hybrid powertrain for final production. This will be based around the same 4-litre twin-turbo V8, but will have an electric motor on the rear axle, boosting combined output to over 800 horsepower. Initial impressions that this DB12's design might be merely a mild update of the DB11 melt away a little in the metal, where this Aston Martin looks strikingly handsome, perhaps the car the DB11 should have been. It's available not only in this coupe form, but also as a convertible Volante model, and in both cases is not only subtly wider, but also visually closer to the ground than its predecessor, sitting on larger 21-inch wheels that house the big discs for the carbon ceramic braking system and are shod with grippy Michelin Pilot Sport 5S tyres that feature a bespoke hand-spun compound. The usual iconic Aston side strakes in the front wings flow into a strong sill line that balances the shape. New, smaller, frameless door mirrors add a finishing touch. At the front, the simply enormous shark-like deep front grille, 54% larger than that of the DB11, guarantees overtaking menace and is framed by smarter AI-generated LED headlights with distinctive pyramid structure illuminated signatures. The fluted bonnet has narrow vents and flows into a nose bearing the latest version of the distinctive wings badge. The lower splitter's been redesigned too, set nearer to the ground than you'd expect it to be on a car that describes itself as a super tourer, and set off by these small black side spats at each corner. Under the bonnet beats a 4-litre V8 badged proudly as being hand-built in Great Britain and signed off personally by the engineer responsible for its final inspection. In this case, we send our compliments to Ahmed Munir. At the rear, where there's the design confidence that comes with 75 years of DB heritage, a DB11 owner might notice this replacement model's extra width. Its track has been widened by a substantial 22mm. A big bore exhaust pipe pokes out of the detailed black diffuser section at each corner, and you get these almost impossibly super slim LED tail lamps, here smoked for extra effect. Of course, what's more important is what you can't see. A redesign of the key components within the previous model's bonded aluminium monocoque has delivered a 7% enhancement in torsional rigidity and a saving of 85 kilograms over the curb weight of the old DB11 at launch, though at introduction that car was powered by a V12. Where you should really notice the investment that's gone into this car, though, is when you take a seat inside. The cabin is a seismic step forwards from the cluttered, out-of-date design of its predecessor, and the new dashboard is no longer so obviously littered with borrowed Mercedes bits. You will need some familiarisation though. It's still a wide car that sits you low below the shoulder line, so it's difficult to see the bonnet, which makes tight space manoeuvring challenging. Aston's finally developed its own centre touchscreen, and not before time. A 10.25-inch monitor that sits in a redesigned raised console and is almost as good as anything you'll find elsewhere. The old gearshift fascia buttons are gone, good, replaced by a Porsche-style gearshift toggle. Just as important as the fresh design is the step up in materials quality, which sets a new standard for Aston. Some of it feels really good, like the chunky engine start button with its rotating collar for changing drive modes, or the knurled metal roller toggles for heater, temperature and volume controls. Plus there's aromatic Bridge of Weir quilted leather upholstery, carbon fibre trim for the centre console and the double-stitched dash, and 3 Art Deco fascia top speakers needed for the 390-watt 11-speaker surround sound setup, provided by the brand's latest audio partner Bowers & Wilkins. There are, though, still a few touches that stop this interior feeling as properly Bentley-like as it should be for the price, like the cheap plastic switches on the over-buttoned steering wheel. Through the new hand-stitched leather wheel, you view another screen that's now all Aston's own, this one for the instruments, which can display with light or dark themes, and either with 2 dials or with a central rev counter flanked by selectable features. For things like driver assistance, trip data, navigation, media selections and phone settings. Plus there's a vehicle section that shows tyre pressures and engine oil level. We mentioned the central screen. You can tell it's Aston's first attempt at this because it doesn't quite have the clarity of form and function that you'll find with, say, a Porsche or Mercedes system. But there's everything you really need, like online 3D navigation, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, 4G LTE connectivity, and for the first time in this model line, voice control. Plus, we're pleased to see that this monitor hasn't inhaled all the climate functions. Shortcuts to functionality are provided by icons along the left-hand side of the frame. The usual ones for audio, nav and phone, plus a car section which connects you into drive modes and a telematics section that shows you power in kilowatts, battery output, torque in newton meters and oil temperature. What else? Well, it feels really spacious in here, the airy ambience, embellished by this big panoramic glass roof which lets only 6% of sunlight through its tinting. The seats are brilliantly supportive and you get these big, cool metal Maserati-like gear shifters behind the steering wheel. It's a bit irritating to have to carefully position the rather cheap-feeling key fob in the cup holder so that the ignition will fire, and both the glove box and the door bins are tiny. There's a hidden area under the centre console with a wireless charging mat, and this box between the seats has twin USB-C ports and a 12-volt socket. Unlike the brand's lesser Vantage model, the DB12, like its predecessor, provides tiny 911 style rear seats, but getting into them is a little bit of a mission. And once inside, where the sculptured chairs are separated by this big Bowers & Wilkins speaker, it goes without saying that an adult will be pretty uncomfortable indeed, and in potential danger, so close will the top of your head be to the glass rear screen. Aston talks of these being suitable for kids of up to 12. We'd put the age rather lower than that. As ever with this kind of thing, it's best to leave it for tailored jackets and designer shopping bags. Let's finish with a look at luggage space. Now, it looks like you might get a hatch here, but no, it's a conventional boot, the lid of which you have to lift yourself. Inside, it's pretty compact, 262 litres in size, so budget a bit extra for the bespoke luggage kit if you've weekend jaunts planned. The rear seat backs don't fold forward, but recessed areas to the left and right do at least mean that you can fit in a little more than you might expect. And there's a warning triangle in the inner boot lid. At the time of this test in autumn 2024, you needed around £188,000 to get yourself this DB12 Coupe. The alternative Volante convertible version of this car cost a cool £202,000 or so as we filmed. And you'll need to add a fair bit onto those figures once you've allowed for various essential extras. This pricing positions the DB12 between Ferrari's Roma and Bentley's Continental GT V8S. And potential customers looking at a super sports car around this price point will also be considering the Maserati Gran Turismo Trofeo and the Mercedes AMG GT63. Standard equipment includes 21-inch forged wheels, LED headlamps with auto high beam and skyhook adaptive damping. Inside, there's a 360-degree 3D camera system, ambient lighting, automatic 2-zone climate control, heated seats, a wireless charging mat, and a 10.25-inch TFT driver information display in the binnacle. Media connectivity is taken care of by a touchscreen central display, also 10.25 inches in size, complete with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. A built-in 390-watt 11-speaker Bowers & Wilkins audio system, navigation and natural voice control. It would take longer than we have time for here to go into all the conceivable options you could add to personalise your DB12. The key things to look at are the Bowers & Wilkins audio upgrade, the carbon ceramic braking system, a heated steering wheel and the optional Sports Plus seats with extended 16-way adjustment. We've got all of that here, along with the optional twill carbon fibre cabin inlays. You might prefer the more race-like carbon fibre performance front seats, and on the question of cabin inlays, either brushed aluminium or ash or walnut open pore wood. Cooled seat ventilation and a panoramic glass roof are also available. Standard camera safety kit is on a different level to previous generation Astons. You get auto emergency braking, forward collision warning, lane keep assist, lane departure warning, lane change assist, lane centering, front and rear cross traffic assist, door open assist, traffic sign recognition, matrix high beam control, driver drowsiness detection, and an e-call system which alerts the emergency services if either the front or the side curtain airbags go off in a collision. We normally start this section with a review of economy and emissions, but of course anyone comfortable with blowing close to $250,000 on a super sports car is unlikely to be overly concerned with trifling issues of that sort. Those that are will be more attracted to the thought of a plug-in hybrid drivetrain, which was being readied for DB12 production at the time of this test and which is already available in this segment in a Bentley Continental GT Speed. Regardless of powertrain, the big ticket cost with cars at this kind of exalted price point isn't frugality, but depreciation. So if you like the idea of a DB12, you'll be pleased to hear that this Aston Martin fares reasonably here. If for some reason you are interested in the fuel and emissions stats, we'll tell you that in coupe form this car manages a 23.2 mpg combined cycle WLTP figure with emissions of 276 grams per kilometre. Thanks to the 78-litre size of the fuel tank, which allows for a touring range of about 460 miles, at least wealthy owners won't be brushing their brogues on dirty filling station forecourts quite as often as they would be with, say, a rival McLaren or Lamborghini. In terms of eco-friendliness, you might think that you could hardly annoy the Greenpeace set more if your choice of car had a whale harpooning gun strapped to the bonnet. Yet, should you be inveigled into conversation with a bearded type, you could point out that in some ways this DB12 is very green indeed. There's no wasteful recycling needed here because due to its build, no recycling is needed. There's nothing to rust and nothing to decay. Look after your Aston and it will still be thrilling people in 50 years' time. Insurance is predictably a top-of-the-shop Group 50E, and servicing will be needed every year or every 10,000 miles, whichever comes first. Dealership visits, of course, won't be cheap, but there shouldn't be a need for unnecessary ones these days. The old Aston adage that customers could find out what was wrong, saving the brand a lot of development time, bother and expense, has thankfully long been abandoned. There's a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, and these days the asking price includes 5 years of maintenance as well. Obviously, hard use will result in heavy brake and tyre wear. And on the subject of tyres, the bespoke Michelin Pilot Sport rubber will be fearsomely expensive to replace, so bear that in mind before you go track day showboating. We still can't help thinking that a DB12 should have 12 cylinders, but such a configuration would doubtless be inappropriate to the new zeitgeist that Aston finds itself in. To be frank, you had to be a fan of the brand to choose this car's DB11 predecessor, which was a product of an underfunded era. The DB12, in contrast, is a super sports car you might conceivably choose over a Ferrari or a Bentley on merit. In character, it's been moved a little further away from a GT Bentley-style contender, but remains day-to-day and long-distance usable in a way that a Ferrari, or for that matter a Lamborghini or a McLaren, just isn't. So this is, as Aston promises, a great combination of those two sports car extremes, which just about justifies a new sub-niche classification. Super Tourer? It's as good as any. And this DB12 is too.